there's so much opportunity to go apply these technologies to niches, and these niches are huge. There's all these spaces in the world that can be made to work better. And it's really human systems that are in the way, of getting there, like the people that go touch and feel this infrastructure and so on. I think there's just so many opportunities.
If you have a smart home today, whether it's a connected thermostat, security system, lights, or curtains that can be controlled with a voice command, much to my wife's disgust, you have today's guest to thank for that. Actually, as it turns out, Alex Hawkinson, who we're talking to today, well, he's the founder of SmartThings, and even his wife wasn't really that impressed with what he achieved. Alex took home automation from this niche concept to a mainstream reality, building one of the most influential platforms in IoT, which would eventually be acquired by Samsung. Now he's taken the vision beyond the walls of the house to fix the city's dumbest infrastructure, to think so much of our water is wasted through leaking pipes that were built 70 years ago. Our power grids rely on manual inspections that are so last century, and entire industries operate reactively, wasting resources and time. The craziest part is we have the technology to fix it. Alex is the founder of BrightAI, and he's applying the same principles that made smart homes possible, IoT, AI, and real-time automation, to implement across our cities, utilities, and infrastructure. This is about turning outdated, crumbling systems into self-monitoring, adaptive, and intelligent networks that save money, protect the environment, and make life better for everyone. Today, in this podcast, we're going to dive into how AI and Edge AI are revolutionizing infrastructure, why blue-collar workers are the biggest beneficiaries of this AI-driven solutions. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, you too will awaken to the concept of the massive economic and environmental impact of smarter cities. This isn't sci-fi. It's happening right now, and the opportunity is absolutely mind-blowing. So how do we go from smart homes to smart cities, and what role does AI play in waking up the world's most outdated infrastructure? Let's find out. This is the Tech Seeking Human podcast. Alex, welcome to the Tech Seeking Human podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I love your podcast, and happy to have a conversation.
You got introduced to me as the founder of SmartThings and now the CEO of BrightAI. They're two huge topics to unpack. Firstly, big fan of SmartThings, been using it for a long time. Big home automation geek, probably not as big as you. Where did that come from? Where did the idea of starting SmartThings come from, and what does that got to do with BrightAI?
It's a great question, yeah, and thank you for being a user of SmartThings. It's been an incredible journey. I sort of grew up with the internet in my career, built multiple companies over time, and was doing sort of small business, software as a service, pure software companies. And honestly, confluence of things led to SmartThings, but I just sort of got, honestly, I love learning and doing new things, and I just got sort of bored of, I don't know, the track that I was on, even though it was very productive. And my family and I have we share a place out in the mountains in Colorado, and went out there after my son had been born a year, a year before. So we'd skipped a year going out there in the winter, and because my wife was too far pregnant the previous year, and got out there, and the house was sort of destroyed by a freeze. Like, it had frozen, the power had gone out and it had frozen up, and then it came back on, and all the pipes had burst, and there was a ton of water damage in the house. And it was so disappointing. The sort of shock of that is sort of what led ultimately to SmartThings. But I couldn't believe, that we didn't know about it, and that this place that was critical to us. And I was sort of lucky that it was not off the grid. It had power, but it was no broadband available. We had like that huge satellite internet, which is questionable if that, can be called internet. And, but like the cell phone, would work. And I think one of my kids was sort of like, I was downloading a book on a Kindle, and I was like, there's bandwidth over the air. How can it be that the house is completely offline to us? And the the shock, I think, of that sort of led me to sort of a what WTF moment and smart thing. So I just reached out to a sort of, I was like, I see new hardware products all the time. It can't be that hard. And reached out to actually, I found a professor at the University of Michigan that was had a side gig on building, ruggedized, custom hardware, and struck up a project. And in about 6 weeks, built us a connected hub that would sort of monitor the cabin. And the big insight for smart things really came from this, like, wow, if I can do that with no hardware experience yet, and now I'm deep in hardware, but at the time I wasn't, if I can do that in 6 weeks, well, the whole world's going to become connected. There's going to be connected devices everywhere. And of course, we talk about this as IoT now, but I really wasn't steeped in that. And which is ironic, given sort of I'm viewed as like one of the great granddads of IoT or something. But anyway, the big insight was like, well, if everybody's going to create connected devices and I'm just some regular software background, how do we make a platform that regular, software developers and even regular consumers can program this physical world that's gonna come online? And so that was sort of the birth of Smart Things. I can talk all about the journey, but yeah, actually the company was initially called Physical Graph Corporation. It wasn't just about the home. Super dorky name, and my wife sort of so it steered me towards Smart Things and away from it in a sense, and we'll get to that. But maybe, but no, it's called Physical Graph Corporation because the idea was there's been like a knowledge graph with Google, information had come online. People got home broadband connections and mobile phones, and then there was like the social graph and companies like the Facebook that arose. And I really believed that there's going to be a physical graph, where the world is interconnected, and that software could sort of make that graph of the physical world happen and so on too. And ever since, founding Smart Things in 2012 and could talk about the journey of the company and everything, it was an amazing experience. And of course, 350 million households later, just bigger than I ever imagined it would be. But still after that physical graph opportunity, and that's really what Bright AI is about. And we can get into that too. But that's sort of the birth of Smart Things.
So that was 2012 is when you started Physical Graph Corporation or Smart Things.
That's right. Yeah. So it was, sort of that winter of 2011, that Christmas time where it was the sort of WTF moment out the place. And it was sort of in March of 2012 that had the sort of overnight, like, oh my gosh, if I can do this, anybody, there's got to be a larger platform here. So it was born in the spring of 2012. And then ramped it up. It was all like bootstrapped initially. We did a Kickstarter campaign because we wanted to be an open platform, that kind of participatory, a big tent. We saw these like closed efforts that were um,
Not working.
not work. Yeah, well, I mean, they worked for limited scenarios, but it wouldn't unlock this idea of a
Yeah.
programmable world. It was sort of like small stovepipes everywhere, and we wanted to be an open platform. So we did a Kickstarter, and then it took off, and ultimately we got through our Series B round, and we Google bought Nest, and all the big titans sort of woke up to this smart home opportunity that was happening, and we were the leading open platform, and so we ended up deciding to consolidate with Samsung with a bunch of different theaters. But great experience.
It's funny that there's so many angles on this, but it's funny you say the big giants woke up because some would say they still haven't yet. They haven't quite embraced what Smart Things and even Home Assistant's done in terms of being an open developer platform that really scales out.
It's funny, you feel like, we felt like we were timed well with Smart Things because, enough like early grounded in tread and sort of industrial IoT and other stuff. And, then you look back now and gosh, like some of the things that we were hoping to do then are still opportunities today, like things really mature. And, I've always been somebody that I think I see things pretty early in terms of what's coming technically, but it feels like the world is accelerating. So maybe my timing is a little tighter to reality now, but it is amazing how, what's old is new again in a lot of cases. There is some progress. I mean, I watched, Smart Things with a great interest this CES, and to see Samsung and Google and others collaborating around this Matter standard and
Mm.
things sort of working together. There is, I think, progress, and I feel like part of pushing towards that a bit towards that open world, but still a ways to go to get there.
Yeah, it's go back just before we move because we've got to get to Bright AI, but the
Yeah.
inner home automation geek in me can't help himself. Um, Go back to the smart things. You put the cabin. You've created a cabin now that has a state that you can tell that it's online or not. What happened after that? Like, how did it go from that to like millions of hundreds of millions of houses in like a couple of years?
Yeah, it was, I mean, I think it was the right vision at the right time, and we had it I'd been a pretty hardened entrepreneur by then, and so enough paranoia about, there were some of our competitors that went through things like I think it was called Wink. They had a firmware update that like bricked all of their hubs, and we were like so paranoid about that we and sort of grizzled at how things can go wrong that I think we really were tenacious and sort of the staying to our vision of an open platform, but keeping things as robust as possible. But lots of scar tissue along the way. But I mean, the summary, I think we decided from the beginning it was best to be open. That before there was this sort of, I think the biggest companies are category creators to some degree, and horizontal platforms rather than just vertical. And if you look at the biggest technology companies in the world, and so wanted to build a great business and felt like, look, there were hardware makers and consumers before, but I felt like it was missing kind of the Venn diagram that would be like software developers. What about all of this? I mean, you had your iPhone at that point, and I barely use my iPhone as a phone, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
mostly a platform for applications. And the thought was something similar, this physical graph, if you just limit it to just whatever the hardware makers can envision and to leaving it up to consumers to just consume that, you'd miss all these opportunities. And so I think it was staying true to the vision. So in the very beginning, there's enough mature IoT technology. We did a Kickstarter campaign, not for funding, thank God, because you can really go wrong there, but we had a great campaign, but it was to see if this sort of vision of an open platform would catalyze around things. And I think we were hoping for like 50 developers or some developers to sign up. We had more than 1,000 sign up in the Kickstarter campaign, and so I think we struck this chord of like, wow, I'm not a firmware guy, but I am a tech forward person. I want to like I can imagine new scenarios for my home, my physical spaces that maybe the hardware maker of the motion sensor can't. And it turned out that really struck a chord, and it speaks to again what we're doing with Bright AI and so on too. But if you take like a simple motion sensor, let's say, as an example, like a thermostat maker might say, well, that's to turn on your thermostat to let you know if you're there or not. And a security guy might say, well, if there's motion, that means, and you've armed your security system, it means like there's a security event. But like, what about everything else? And it was amazing to see the developer community do things like literally like I remember a developer group of parents of disabled children like building apps to let kids control their physical environment. And I remember somebody with aging parents, elders, living at home still independently, building apps for motion patterns for like what it means to be like healthy. And it turned out you could like predict onset of dementia and all sorts of other things with elders at home. And like all these magical things become possible if you just get out of the way and you allow an ecosystem to develop, where people's creativity can be unlocked. So I think that vision we just sort of struck at the right time, and we had that critical mass of developers, and it was of course challenging, and we stayed after it, to make an open platform. And it was tempting to go narrow many times because would watch, later a company like Ring or something that just did one thing, and of course maybe they even had a bigger economic outcome. But the vision was this open, inclusive world, and so on. So we stayed with the vision. I think we caught that lightning in a bottle where we had a big enough ecosystem, keep building apps, kept coming up with creative use cases, and then I think, we could have been totally successful independently, but when all the big guys, show up and they decide they've got to do something in smart home, we took advantage of that and sort of the learning from Samsung Scale, who was committed to the open platform to really go big. And of course, that here we are later. It's like crazy scale. I mean, 88 countries, 350 million households, and growing a lot, and billions of connected devices on the platform. I remember from I retired from SmartThings in 2018, but recently, caught up with one of the people that's still there. It's sort of millions of events per second, flowing through the platform, just enormous scale. So anyway, it was like that's a kind of a summary, but there were big bumps along the way. I mean, if you other entrepreneurs, it wasn't without heartache. We have a lot of existential moments throughout, and you just have to be relentless and plow through those things.
So just before we move, I want to you've just got this new open platform. You've signed up these developers. When I'm doing my home automation, it's like temperature, curtains, and some lighting, probably like the three sort of main use cases, and actually maybe things like making the garage door smart because the dumb remotes. And that was actually one of the use cases of using Remotio and SmartThings as an integration. What were those initial? What were the initial use cases that you initially saw?
I mean, it
Or
was
was it everything?
I was sort of a pretty dorky, and with the open platform idea, I love seeing like all this long tail of applications happen. But it clustered into a big few, which are typical smart home scenarios you see today. Of course, like big ones around security. People sort of tend to hate those monolithic security only companies that really don't work that well. Lots of false positives when it's you at home, et cetera. So we saw a lot of creative security use cases. Of course, energy use with thermostats lighting and otherwise smart lighting, and things there. I'd say with security, just sort of peace of mind, like this, like sensing a flood or things going wrong, whether it's a security event or some other, is everything okay at home? Those are the big ones. But always love seeing like, there was this guy that made like his liquor cabinet, like it was like this like monastery, like group of monks, like like it would light up kind of like your background there, and and the angels would sing, in the background when you'd open it up or whatever. So you'd see those like super goofy, very human, use cases, and then of course like amazing, compelling, life or death things like these, safety and medical
Mm.
and other things too. But yeah, it was amazing. I mean, those big ones. Of course, we did get sort of the thing that happened with Smart Things that was a little frustrating. It's an amazing experience, but we ended up kind of trapped in the home, and that's a big part of the reason why I went and started Bright AI later. Is that just we started a physical graph corporation, but you investors pile in and you have to solve a problem, and we just sort of got tracked inadvertently into being a smart home company. And there's sort of a funny thing that happened along the way. Like at one point, I like smart lighting, but I was always running like different app scenarios and stuff in my house, and my wife came down in the middle of the night one night and like literally like all the landscape lights and all the inside lights like all turned on because I'd like had this like turn everything on like party mode or whatever. And she came up like screaming at me like just like this is the dumbest thing ever. Like no one needs this. Felt like she was like exposed in front of the world. And of course, no one's looking and who cares. But it did strike me as like this, are we solving really important problems here? Like, are they life or death? No. Like in most cases, there's a narrow subset, but by and large, the home, it's so many different use cases matter to so many different people. Like what matters to me doesn't necessarily matter to you. And it's hard to strike at some of the biggest opportunity spaces for sort of making a difference in the world. So it was again, amazing journey, but I love the platform and all the experiences of it. It taught me to kind of how to connect anything, anywhere, about developer ecosystems, about like doing these things at scale. But at the end of the day, it was like, again, don't want to criticize it, but is it, in terms of the highest and best purpose, in terms of what you can do to make an impact in the world and human society? Maybe not.
It,
Yeah.
it's amazing to hear you say that because a lot of people haven't dabbled in home automation, but when you do, like when you have your landscape lights be able to come on and off like at 11 without having to walk around and turn everything on, being able to open and close curtain, the convenience actually once you have it and then you take it away. Yes, it's not life changing, but like the fact that built this platform and then sold it to Samsung for a considerable amount of money is like a life achievement that most people would just shake their head and go, "It's unbelievable." Did your wife, when you sold it, did she go, "It's incredible, Alex. Like you're incredible what you've done," or was she still just like, "Go do something more purposeful"?
She's my sort of biggest supporter and critic at the same time. So she's like, "We were fine before, we're fine after." But we're no, I mean it was no, it's appreciated, and it is. I mean, I will say it's like my daughter's studying abroad in Denmark right now, so that like concept of hygge, which is like that comfort, the cozy
Yeah,
comfort. There's an element of like it makes your home more your own, in a
yeah.
sense, and that's really wonderful. And so it's awesome, but it's awesome, but, again, as you get older in life, you sort of try to at least I try to say, like, what's the most we could talk about entrepreneurial lessons, but I would say one of mine is, like, you should solve the biggest problem you can imagine, going after, because sort of this paradox is that the best people and the best capital wanna work on the problems that really move the world, at these critical levels, and so yeah, I mean, it was an amazing experience, but, I life is short and, I'm super glad to have done it, and it did lead to, like, get a lot of the inspiration and learnings for Bright AI, but, I kind of found myself at the tail end of it, like, yearning to solve, like, I hesitate to call them real, like, really
Big
important
problems.
everybody could universally agree, really big problems, that are in the world.
And what's that?
So, it's, I think it's all of the critical infrastructure and services that like literally modern civilization depends upon. So the choice, this sort of leads to Bright AI, but the choice with smart things was like, okay, well, I believe in this physical graph kind of vision, that you can connect the world and through that bidirectional twin of the physical world with sensors and actuators and so on, you can unlock intelligence into these physical spaces. And so, at some level, like imagine thinking about like what should that be? And there's all these things that we depend on that you just don't think about every day. Water, like electricity, energy in the form of what lets you like move your car around and other things, which is could be electricity is like a lot of oil and gas, in lots of industries, the physical infrastructure for logistics and transportation, critical services like HVAC, today it's a cold day here, like life or death in some cases without it, lots of thermodynamics and what if climate change when it gets really hot, pest control, the world of the pandemic that we went through and sort of disease pathogens and like is our food supply through everything else like free of sort of disease carrying things, and then like look at all of it with like in the backdrop of secular trends like shrinking birth rates, shrinking labor force, huge wherever you fall on sort of climate change. It's not just climate change but this idea that even if we had the labor and capital, should we keep doing things the way we're doing? And I think that wherever you fall on the political spectrum, like we should find ways to do more with less. It's good
Mhm.
for all purposes, but call it sustainability of human civilization and so on too. And so the sort of base core idea was, well, what about if we go fix all of those services? If you look at them individually, a lot is broken about those critical services and infrastructure. They're very, it's hard for them to recruit high tech capabilities into those industries. And it's like literally what our modern civilization depends on. So Broad AI is, think of it as a kind of like smart things, but it's a platform for this physical AI, so IoT plus AI, and applying it to those critical infrastructures, and making it all kind of awakening it, and making it all into the physical graph that is intelligent and efficient and safe and sustainable, in the way that's sort of hoped for. So
But
that's the evolution. That's the biggest problem I can imagine me working on.
yeah, yeah, it was an open question as to like, what are the big problems? And it's like, well, it's not curing cancer, but like, how big of a problem is this? Like, you're talking about the physical hardware. People don't. The average person probably it's the same as home automation. The average person that never had it didn't know that they needed it. With this particular problem, it's also a little bit like but my water and electricity and gas and everything, it comes to my house. Like, who cares? But is there more to it that the average person doesn't understand?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at critical infrastructure, and this is this wonderful opportunity to address all this with really AI is the mega trend. Like, what is the intelligence you can bring once you've got that physical connection with IoT and other things? And that's what we call physical AI. But if you look at the services underneath, there's just a lot of problems. So a lot of our infrastructure was built after World War II. Um, let's take water supply, as an example. So our water infrastructure was mostly put in after World War II, including in the U.S. With all the development in the country, and it has like a 50 to 75-year lifespan. So a lot of literally the pipes under the ground are deteriorating to the level where something like 30% of the fresh water that we produce leaches back out in the environment.
Oh, well.
In terms of wastewater, a ton of it like also leaches back out in sort of ways that we don't want. And literally, if we took the current approach based on labor trends and other things like that to go dig all that out of the ground and do it in a traditional way, would take hundreds of years. Like, we can't keep up with the deterioration now at this point because the world's changed in other ways. So that's like an example there. Like, how do you fix that? Another example, I think we all experience this, with what's going on with whatever you say the reasons are, sort of more dramatic, things in climate. There's more pressure on energy systems, and when the power grid goes down, due to, let's say, fragility in some spot, where you didn't know about it, it can cause a real crisis, like life or death situations for people everywhere. So big, widely distributed grid. You don't have humans that can go walking around sort of checking on all this all the time. And so you have this fragility that builds up, in it and things too. And then, take other things that you don't really think about, like take pest control. It's critical. Like, the answer isn't like live with more pests and more disease pathogens, but the toxins that are used in pest control are like killing whole ecosystems. The rodenticide you use for rodents in your garage, then the thing crawls outside and dies, and it kills 10 other creatures, that eat the thing, on the way, and it's bad stuff. And so similarly, we don't have the labor to go around doing these like periodic inspections. These are minimum wage or less, workers in a lot of cases that uh, you know, is the care there? Not necessarily. And there's sort of carpet bombing in the current model. We can't continue to do that. But yet, with climate change and other things, there's like more growth of disease carrying pests and more ecosystems and so on too. So like, those are the types of problems. I mean, they're very substantial, and we think that there's this opportunity to massively impact those, and it'd be great to talk about that. I mean, like, the level of impact you can have through these technologies is just profound.
Yeah, so you say some of the examples, just to just kind of summarize and then get the thinking of like how do you solve them, are like critical water infrastructure that's been in the ground forever that is failing. That we and you just mentioned the statistics of how much water wastage we have, to electricity, to the pesticides. How are you solving it? Like, smart things is about putting things to make your house smart. We're not talking about making pipes smart. But like, how do you what does Bright AI do to solve this problem?
Or are we talking about it?
Or are we making them smart? Yeah.
I think, it's funny. We sometimes, at least it's thought provoking, even if it doesn't get a laugh. But we sort of had this insight with Bright that, where the modern world is kind of still doing things. This will sound disappointing, like the same exact way the Romans did it with critical infrastructure. Like, and we like to say the Romans would be laughing at us. Like, they were really sophisticated, as a sidebar, in managing their infrastructure. It was a big part of like the Roman Empire. It was very successful at the time. Was, if you took their water infrastructure as an example, like the placement of manholes that we have today comes from the Romans. I mean, they figured out like periodic access ports to go down and inspect the aqueducts, and they would send in trained artisans, that technicians, I guess, that would go in and inspect for calcification and blockages and all this other stuff. And like, it was too critical to fail. So they'd periodically send humans that were trained into the infrastructure to be in front of things. And that's sort of the best available technologies of the time, right? And so they'd be disappointed is like, are we using the best available technology at the time? Like, no, we're still basically doing the same thing in all these industries. So what we recognized is that you can we're built we the Bright AI platform is called Stateful, and it's a kind of a dorky programmy term. But the idea is that all these industries, what do they share in common, even though they seem so disparate? Pest control and the water supply. Like, it's all of this infrastructure and things that we care about. Basically, the way they work today is you send people around to go understand the state of that infrastructure. Is there a pest there or not? Okay, I'm going to go look for signs of it. If there's the water supply working right, are there leaks and corrosion in a given pipe? You're sending somebody to stick a like manual tool, down there. Might just be a simple camera and look with their eyes like a human being sitting on the surface, like at whether or not there's corrosion in this hard to reach environment, and then taking action based on that very reactively and so on. So the basic core thread for Bright is that the idea is you can build a platform that lets you unlock real-time state understanding in the whole world and make that very easy to deploy. And with that data that comes from that real-time state, you can predict future state and you can get in front of it, with AI. And so going from sort of reactive to very proactive. So best to dig into examples. Like, I mean, in the case of could talk about the platform if you want to dig into it, but it's got a few facets. So one of them is site and asset visibility. So when there's no human around, what can you leave behind in an environment to kind of watch over it? Second is autonomous inspection, like where it's hard to send a human, can you send a robot carrying edge AI and sensors into a place to autonomously inspect and even do maintenance on an environment? And the third is when you still have humans, like, but there's hard to recruit people, hard to keep people. Can you take less trained humans and augment them with wearables and co-pilots that like bring superhuman intelligence right at their fingertips along with them while they do the work? And so those three facets are sort of the unlock. So in the case of water, as an example, we are, used to be a guy sticking a camera down there and then a crew doing stuff. We've partnered with a great company called Azuria, who is all these businesses you've never heard of that we all are customers of, that maintains, most of the water infrastructure in the US, uh, built a fully autonomous robot that you can shoot down these pipelines. It can completely, automatically inspect and assess them with AI. And then it can actually drive the automated maintenance of the pipelines as well. So this putting a pipe within the pipe and reconnecting it to the services and other things like that, but pretty profound. And so it lets you solve that problem. Like, how can we both inspect and then maintain the water infrastructure with with the humans that we have available and get to it all in one go?
How big is this robot that's going down the pipe?
It's like, I mean, most pipelines are sort of 8 inches, and below, 8 to 12 inches across. So the robots, in this case is it's not like what you see in the Matrix movie or something like that with the squiggies that went down the futuristic massive like sewer lines, but
Not yet, anyway.
not yet, yeah. So not until Elon brings back the Boring Company or something.
Yeah.
But they're these robots are, in this case, they're, I don't know, like a little bigger than a tennis ball can, something like that, and they have different attachments with AI sensors and robotic arms that can do things.
So it goes down, it identifies there's a crack in the pipe or a break somewhere. You were saying that also it can leave things behind. Like just take us through, like, how does it get solved? It goes down and goes, "Yep, it's broken." Then what?
This would be an interesting series of things to dig into. Like, every area of infrastructure has these differences, but again, we'll come back to the state understanding as like the key, the sort of thing across them all. But so the example of the way you update modern water pipelines is you go send a robot. You can send a robot down to inspect them. It used to be humans that were like categorizing everything, and the robot can do that with high accuracy with AI and better than human, because it's got more sensors, more sensing modalities. So you send it down. It sort of builds a digital twin of your water pipeline in a given city, let's say. It can then really tell you the condition of that and what you would put inside it. To the best way to fix water pipelines is to put a new pipe within a pipe rather than dig it all out of the ground. And so then it lets you plan that you have this kind of a liner that then another machine at the surface pushes down. Imagine like a sock unrolling inside out into the pipe that then bakes it into a hardened pipe that'll last another 50 years. You can put the same robot back down with a an arm on it that it knows because it can see through that liner in a way that a human can't. It knows how to go down the pipeline and reinstate the connections between it and the households or the office buildings or whatever these services in the pipeline. So what used to be a real mess, humans would look at this camera data, kind of miss some things. Often they'd manually kind of do this lining work, and then they'd send some hapless soul, into the highly trained hapless soul with a camera and a drill bit on a robot, literally manually doing this to find behind the closed pipe, like where the services should have been. If they screw it up once, they have to pull the whole thing out and redo it all. Instead, now, this AI driven, robot on the BrightAI platform goes down, builds the digital twin. It automates this process of relining and reinstating the laterals. And so the unlock and all that is you can get to more pipeline more quickly, more cheaply, and sort of solve this macro problem. And it all stems from this base set of technologies, which is like sensing, edge AI, and automation, which is sort of software that controls this part of this physical environment. And we can unpack another example, like again, at far afield, like pest control, and talk about how it's like largely similar, even though it seems so different.
But before we shift, because one of the questions I was going to ask is then with all of this technology, is it a problem where does it economically make sense? Like technology is expensive. Is it
Yeah.
cheaper to do this than to send a human? Or is it just like, it just doesn't matter. We have to do it because we can't fix these things any other way? Because I'm leading to like how you think about all the water companies, a lot of the water companies in Australia, I think, are like government owned. Therefore, they don't have big budgets to solve a lot of these problems. And it starts to be thinking about the economical viability of what you're doing and can it scale? Is it one of those things where you're just like, hey, if we plan for this, we can just go to all these other companies and the opportunity is endless?
I will say it is amazingly productive economically as well. So the best things here are, let me give you sort of what I talked to the Bright AI team about, and sort of this is a macro statement. Sort of, I believe that the application of these technologies, like the physical AI, to critical infrastructure, we think we can sort of unlock 50% or greater productivity gains, meaning
Wow.
the same number of humans can do twice as much work at least as they could before, at least double capital efficiency. So if you spend a dollar on a capital asset, you can sort of extend the life of that asset by 2x. You can get, make those dollars go much further for whatever currency you're in. I guess it's going to be Trump coin or something soon, but we'll leave that there. But whatever currency you're in, double that sort of the capital efficiency.
Could be Elon coin too.
And then and then last, like basically meet the sustainability goals because you're doing a lot more with a lot less, and we can get into that too. But like if you look at all these industries, that level of impact, and of course that unlocks massive, I like to talk about business problems that aren't a whack-a-mole. I don't know, in Australia, like I don't know if the whack-a-mole game was at carnivals, but you hit one pole, another everything pops up another hole. The idea is, nobody loses here. It's not like a whack-a-mole. Like you don't just hit down costs and like then the quality goes down over here. Like you both do it with less cost, and it's a better service for everybody, and it's also better for the planet. Like everybody wins. So you see that in these municipalities or whatever the dynamic is, but I think that's a pretty universal like level of impact. So I think I'm very optimistic about the future. I mean, of course, you have these dystopian views on AI and other things that crop up, but in the here and now, we literally can't solve the world's biggest problems in the current methodologies. Is the world as awesome as it can be? Absolutely not. There's so many ways you can imagine it being better, and this unlocks the ability to go get it. With half the people or less, you can go fix the problem. You can double the efficiency of the capital dollars, and you get all the sustainability goals all at once. So it makes sense for everybody.
How's it going to scale? Like you sold me. I'm like, this is unbelievable. It's also an example of like yeah, the problem you're solving is significant. Like all these countries in the world with all of these aging pipes that don't know how to solve it all. And yet you're also probably reskilling people because people along the way have to learn how to do something, but now they're actually learning something else. They're not crawling down pipes anymore. They're looking at a software platform to figure out what is going wrong and then potentially procuring fixes.
Yeah.
How does it scale?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of right now things are limited by what are they limited by? Our ability to fix is limited by labor. Can you recruit, train, and hire the labor to um, can you recruit, hire and retain the labor that does this work? Do you have the dollars, capital dollars to spend? It's like limited in some ways. And then in some industries, you also have, whether it's out of the good of your heart or it's regulatory, like the rodenticide I mentioned is outlawed now in a lot of the world. Like you literally can't do it the old way. So if you're in business doing that, you have to find a new way. In these cases, we've seen this in other industries. Like when they get digitized, they get better with scale. The Roman Empire, it just sort of broke down at like Hadrian's Wall or something because like the communication mechanisms literally couldn't carry messages to the centralized infrastructure fast enough. You get into the modern age and every job you do brings in more data that helps train the AI that gets you a little bit better, with scale. And so all these things like compound together. So you build the technology tool set, using our platform, and then we see these industries can go much faster than they had before. So we've seen in this there's a lot of appetite for this critical infrastructure. The world is sort of waking up to these problems. You're either confronted with it by a crisis that occurs or some other dynamic. And we found that like this is really the only way. This technology is happening right at the right time to sort of unlock these companies.
But a lot like SmartThings, when it first started, you open it up to developers, then had all of these use cases come in. When you're
Totally.
starting Bright AI, which was the use case? Because you've talked about water, electricity, gas, pesticides. There's like so many. And in my head, I'm like,
Yeah.
where did you start? What and why?
We BrightAI, I think it's going to end up much bigger than SmartThings. As a side note, like
Wow.
I think that, and I don't say that lightly. Like we at first, I'm a big believer. I built a lot of different businesses, and you don't sort of take venture capital dollars until you know what the pattern is. So in the beginning, we actually bootstrapped to almost 100 million in revenue, and that surprises a lot of people. And it's because we were looking for that pattern, on how you scale. It's a great question. So the first use cases we wandered into uh, uh, talk to the owners of the services companies that run critical infrastructure. And that tends to be private equity in a lot of different cases. It wasn't a space I was super familiar with, but
Mhm.
it's a great force for good in a lot of cases in the world. Private equity firms, they buy big, services businesses and businesses of different sorts in the middle of the economy, and they'll hold them for 5 to 7 years, and they have a license to make change happen. And the right private equity firms, they look at it as an opportunity to sort of bring new technologies and new management styles and other things into these industries. And so we got our first customers by talking to private equity companies that own those infrastructure businesses. And so we got injected right at the CEO or owner level. And we just look for people that share the vision of like we could unlock, labor constraints, we could unlock productivity and efficiency gains and deliver a better service. Uh, and so we went out and it sort of came to us like these first examples of infrastructure, and we would build large custom solutions, in the beginning with IoT, some cases autonomous technologies. We had just co-pilots on a mobile app for the technicians and so on. And we've got 7 industries that we're in now, and we've found the pattern. So the big thing for Bright this year, how do you scale, is now that we've got the pattern, we have started to take investment dollars. So this, we did our first like seed round, which is just a seed round of 15 million with upfront. That was sort of a little baby compared to where we're going. They're an amazing investor for that stage. We'll be raising another round shortly here. But to build this platform that lets us go now to thousands of companies. And so the idea, like, how do you do that? What are the common threads between us? It's it's three big things, with site and asset visibility. Like everybody wants to monitor some part of infrastructure, say pest control or HVAC or your power distribution grid, at the points of failure. So we've got to build a next generation set of products that you can take off the shelf instead of custom IoT devices and deploy into this infrastructure that with a real breakthrough can last sort of 10 years, it's the life that you think about, to just permanently give you that state understanding with Edge AI of what's happening in that infrastructure. So wireless, powerless sensors that run Edge AI, it's sort of pretty magical. Second, I think everybody's seeing it, like we're on the edge of a robotics revolution. That's really, the motors are the same. It's the AI that's coming. So what used to be your dumb Roomba that was stumbling around in your house has now got artificial general intelligence running it. It's freaking crazy. So can make decisions about, it's, yes, you saw the little robot vacuum with an arm that can pick up, things like
Yeah.
it can fully understand if it's a pill bottle or a sock, and it wasn't the robot company that built that. It was the advent of AI and these larger, near AGI contexts that we're getting to now. But we're leveraging those same things to sort of arm these robots with context understanding and foundation models to go into the infrastructure. And the last bit is with the human workers. We found that these blue collar workers, or baby blue, well, if you want to call it, like they're sort of between information, they're highly trained, but they're out there in the real world doing stuff with their hands. They don't want like a fancy mobile phone app. We built a wearable that's basically a wearable sensor package that they can just interact with via voice, and it's of course doing Edge AI on its own to let them be hands free and work on its infrastructure and basically have the best expertise of the world like on their shoulder, at all times while they're doing it. So we're building a platform that does that, and that lets you, instead of being a couple of years and lots of money to sort of build one of these solutions, it'll let really any company that wants to do stateful applications in the physical world go about doing them. So that's sort of the size and shape of it. And I'm sure we'll get to a point where consumers could totally geek out and do something crazy with the platform someday. For now, it means that at least means that we can go from a handful of customers, that we can count on two hands, here, to hundreds or thousands of customers that can get this done for much less money.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about like you must have really good partners in because are you physically building the hardware or are you partnering with people? Because the next part of the question is like
Hmm.
you said there's commonalities between the industries. Like, so you're basically building out a kit that's then like this could work for water, this will work for electricity, this works for whatever, and with enough knowledge across enough of the markets, then you can really like go out to like the top industries in nearly every country or region and then apply the same type of use case.
Yeah. So it's both. So it's all the above. So I'm a big believer. I mean, where this is why, I mean, I don't know, maybe I don't think a younger version of me could have built this company. It took a lot of grizzle and like issue because it's complicated. We're building a kind of a critical platform that has to just work. And, it's not, you got to move fast, but it's not like this break automatic. You've got to like make things really resilient as you go and so on too. So it's interesting. The world has evolved, so you can do hardware almost like software now. There's a big hardware ecosystem, and we're not the device manufacturer, but we're the designer and we're accountable for the hardware we're creating. So we have a ecosystem of underlying partners, but we have the firmware and hardware engineers will actually design the devices and then all the software that runs on them, the cloud, everything back through all of the back end to sort of make this a cohesive platform. But
Are
it's
you Alex, are you an engineer?
I went to Carnegie Mellon, so it's funny, I'm like have imposter syndrome all the time now. I was an engineer. I computer science and neuroscience, sort of early AI stuff, and that I sort of found my space is sort of synthesizing teams and seeing what's coming around the corner. So I don't code as much as I used to or other things like that, but I'm good at interacting with engineers, let's say it that way, sort of thinking like an engineer and so on. So I get an opportunity to, great people when I work on great problems. So I get an opportunity to work with great engineers in hardware, firmware, like edge software, in cloud, in mobile, in all these pieces that you have to synthesize together to make the platform run. And of course, SmartThings had some of those things too. So we've been able to, use that learning experience to
Yeah,
go.
I'm trying to picture it because you mentioned like CEOs, and it's like you got to have a conversation with the CEO most likely in order to get the buy-in to go in and just have the potential to solve this problem. But
Yes.
then presumably, what do? They hand you off to their engineers, and you have engineers and engineers talk to each other about these are the problems, and then you come up with a solution of how you're going to solve it. And then when you've seen it enough times, you go, okay, I can spot the trends that are going on now. I think we've got a solution
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah, it's a bit that way. So, but it's evolving now. This new platform, I can show you a couple pieces of it. We're going to announce most of it this year, but I'll like sneak peek onto camera, like little bits of it. But we would do the first stage of the company. I just love learning personally too. It's like literally like the best thing. If there's like one of the purposes in life, it feels like to me, it's like that wonder of discovery and humility, about the things you don't know and that others do, and sort of coming together. So,
This is
uh,
why I do. This is why I do the podcast too, is to get the
right.
opportunity to learn from people like you as to how they're solving big problems.
Right. And vice versa. I mean, so we would do these field discovery visits. So we would meet these CEOs that have been in their industry for, their whole careers. And these companies are sometimes 100 years old and you've never heard of them, like, um, Osmos, the customer of ours, like, who's Osmos? Well, did you know they like all of the wooden power poles in the entire country? They basically are the one that inspects all of them, like, okay, that sounds good. Like, no idea, but you get a pairing with a great CEO that cares, about like doing things better. They have the sort of both financial and sort of economic and other imperatives to sort of, you know, move faster, be more sustainable, be more profitable, et cetera. And then I found you synthesize engineers with all the different backgrounds who don't know about that problem, and you get a curious group of people, and you go look in the field. You literally, I've got pictures of me with a hard hat down the sewer, which I never thought I would be, but I think that's cool, to go down and see how you get a lot of empathy for the real work that happens at the front lines of these critical parts of infrastructure. When you do that, people that haven't been steeped in that problem, you can just watch, what these and you get a lot of empathy for what these frontline workforces have to go through. It is brutal. They are out there day in and day out to keep this critical infrastructure going and struggling with it. And you come up with ideas and you hatch those ideas for like, oh, if I can see if we could unlock this piece of the equation here, we could really change the economics and the quality, on the other side. So we do those field discovery visits, and then exactly we sort of build a joint team with in that infrastructure, and we'll hatch up this program and bring something into existence together. Then BrightAI operates the solution on behalf of this. They don't know about back end, like firmware, hardware, software cloud, and they will operate it as a service for them. And they just get to transform their workforces based on how they can use this new tool. So that's been the model to date. So what's shifting there now is that's still going to exist. I mean, you have to go deep to solve these problems, but we're in the stateful platform. We've got off the shelf toolkits. So we've seen the common pattern now where, okay, wow, we can build something that you can take and like just go deploy it and start learning immediately. So give you an example, if the taking it, the example of like this is like I just happen to have it here because I'm talking to somebody about it. This is the original SmartThings motion sensor. Pretty ugly, but it was a motion sensor like you'd have in a security system. What did that give you? Like there's motion or not, but not much data. But you could, with context, if it's somebody's home or not. If they're home, then you can turn on the lights, and if they're not home, then it can be a security device, that kind of thing. A very simple thing, died after a year or two on the battery, you'd have to replace it, all that. Um, in Stateful, we've got an off-the-shelf set of Edge AI stickers, we call them, but this is bigger than the final one will be, but this is an example of one in my hand. The revolution in this is that this is full Edge AI device. So this is like eyes and ears of the world. Like I'm a believer that nature sort of imbued us with our senses. So it can feel, sense, vibration patterns and complexities there, temperature, humidity, full audio array, so it can hear. It's got vision, so it can see, and it's got full edge AI and reprogrammability. So you can put that thing in a let's say in a warehouse, and it can be a universal pest species recognizer, like see not just motion, but pests and which species and where they're coming and going from. You could put it on the edge of a highway and you could sort of detect, traffic patterns and accidents and otherwise. And this thing will last for 10 years on the battery that's inside it. You could put it on a power transmission line, and the sway of the line and the wind, you could sort of know when you should bring the power transmission down because of risk of wildfire, or you can hear a surge coming along by sensing the vibration and the sound of that going down the power line. So like you get this like it's going to be pretty crazy. So when we launch these things, but they're sort of imagine we call them the stickers because you just 1 minute you deploy it, lasts forever, has built-in connectivity, does edge AI, and it can see these state patterns in the world. So the difference between the old way of like art of the possible, and then we hatch up a custom solution. Now we're going to be able to just provide these picks and shovels, so to speak, and some company that we're not closely talking to can say, you know what, I have an idea. I can collect data. I can stick this on a machine that I care about, and it can learn the patterns of what's normal, for that environment. And I can use an API then to trigger, more proactive workflow events and other things like that. So that's sort of the direction we're going. It should let us go from, again, sort of tens of companies that we work with to thousands, over the course of the next year or two.
Have you forecasted the prediction? So for anyone who's just listening to this on the audio, when you were showing that little device, it's like literally the size of a half an iPhone. Like
Yeah,
it's pretty small. Have you forecasted how many of these things you think will exist? When you just said like it can see, it can hear, it can feel, its vibration.
a
It's
lot, a lot. I mean, I think that the a lot. I mean,
yeah,
I
because the use cases are ridiculous. I was picturing highways and power poles and like
the key is
just
that it can last.
cityscapes.
The key breakthrough is another topic to unpack, but is something I worked with the team at Carnegie Mellon around, but is a energy consumption breakthrough. But to make these things last for 10 years, they and do all this work is
Mhm.
really crazy because you can leave them in parts of the infrastructure that you couldn't before. It sort of opens up use cases where you could leave them in the in the line, in the water lines, on the power lines, on the poles, in the environment. So, it's funny. I talked to the team about it. It's like we think several per habitable acre of land on Earth. Like, it could be trillions of these devices at some point. But I think in the near term, baby steps, many millions of these because they're the eyes and ears, and they're inexpensive, and it'll let you go from the Romans. We're gonna make the Romans proud. That's the goal. They'd be like, dang, that's the way. Like you just know what the state of the world is at all times. And of course, we could have a whole session on the implications of that and what it means for
Yeah.
security and privacy and other things too. But it's really remarkable what you can do.
Yeah, and I don't like it's too much fun to ruin it with like too many people they come up with great technology ideas and someone just goes, "Oh yeah, but it's not private and it's not secure, therefore we shouldn't be doing it." It's like, no, can we just like park that conversation for now? Because like let's think about the potential of the
Yeah.
what it can solve. But it sounds to me also like you're gonna have to have because we just talked about the potential of what it can do. Like people like are you envisaging like a scenario where developers are teaching each other the use cases? Like you're not coming up with the use cases and then building an education platform where essentially people can learn how to develop and do their own things, or are you opening it up to people and let them in the same way you sort of did that with smart things?
The intention is to open it up, but it's of course amazing what you can do with unsupervised learning now. So
Yeah.
AI is really different. I mean, if I'm doing smart things now, like the opportunity to take advantage of the advances in AI is just ridiculous, And so we're doing that with this. So you can also they teach themselves. So I can take this and put this on let's say I'm a developer, but we're moving into the universe of sort of no code. What is a developer? It can be the business person, thinking
Yep.
about a problem. But let's say I had a complex piece of machinery that I wanted to monitor, and all of that data. You send your technician periodically, and then when something's wrong, or they kind of hook instruments up to it and they kind of listen to it. But all the things that happened in between have been lost. I mean, the data existed in the real world, but nobody went and got it. This thing you can just like attach to this machine, and you can imagine it can be in a learning mode where it just sits there, and over the course of the whatever number of months, it builds its own state model of understanding of like, okay, I know nothing about this, but pretty soon it can be like, okay, there's 13 states this thing is in. And then you can go back as the operator and say, like, label them. Okay, listen to this. This sounds like the compressor starting up. This sounds like, the sound the this part makes when it's rattling loose. This sounds like, or this feels like X, whatever. um, and it builds up a state model, and then you get to work with that. So it's pretty magical in that what's happening with AI is this recursive self improvement loop where you can imagine. Let's go to the garage door scenario in a home scenario. Like there's an early SmartThings one that I loved. You'd put the sensor on it that would just know if it's horizontal or vertical and doors open or shut. Pretty mundane at the time. Now imagine you could stick a sticker on it, and not only does it had built-in like understanding of open and shut, but you could really build then state models for, is the door operating correctly or does it need maintenance? Of course, like there are packages inside. Are there pests in my garage because it's got vision or sound, and it has state understanding models for those things? The sound of some other piece of utility equipment not working well. Like, I don't know. But you can imagine unlocking, if you outfitted a part of the world with AI, what could you both learn, about the patterns that exist there, and then also like bring, again, the intelligence of the world, to that context. It gets really exciting, to think about what you can
It's
do. And you do need to make it private and secure, all that stuff,
yeah, yeah.
parking that for the moment. It's not that that's not, you think deeply about that. But I was saying critical infrastructure, like you can do that. It's not like sitting in your bedroom or something. And it's like, is the power pole going to fall over or not? Like you can just solve that problem now, like with these things.
Yeah, 'cause and then when you're talking about the AI, the thing that's mind blowing is like, yeah, you would go, you get like I've got the smart things sensors are actually really good, and I looked at one recently, and it does like it does the same thing. It's like vibration, it does like temperature, it does pivot and tilt and where it is and these sort of things. But you use that and go, I just want to know if the door's open and closed, and I just want to know what the temperature is, and if it gets to a certain temperature, then turn the air conditioner on.
Yeah. Right.
You don't have to apply that. What you're saying is you don't have to apply the use case up front. AI will automatically start learning, and then it can start based on what it's learning and start figuring out like it can apply the use case after the fact. Like you don't have to have the logic ahead of time. And so there's
Absolutely. Yeah.
potential things that we haven't even thought of yet.
A lot of them. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's again, it still goes back to this original vision, like this physical graph, and what can happen if you let creativity run loose with that. And there's so much opportunity, for this in the world to make the world a better place. It's just ridiculous. So again, we're still in early innings. I mean, we're building these tools that let you get out into the critical infrastructure, but then where the world goes with it after that, it's going to be, I think, be really, really exciting. I mean, it's we're going to a place where any part of the world that exists, you can imagine that you can have, of course, have the equivalent of your best technician ever in any particular domain. Like there, it's an equivalent of them being there, watching that part of the world. And then, of course, that gets, if you don't have a technician because you've never seen that data before, like we haven't been there to like, I think there's a lot of patterns in the world that exist that we don't understand because the data kind of falls on the floor, so to speak. We're not there witnessing it enough to really see the pattern. And of course, those things too, it can also sort of automatically, the beauty of this unsupervised learning and other forms of sort of what's emerging with AI is that you have intelligence that can see patterns that we haven't witnessed, yet. And it really, I think, it's going to get incredibly exciting and weird at the same time.
Yeah,
Where it goes.
like as you're talking, I'm trying to apply my small brain to the different variations of things that, like, I just can't help but like think through like trains and train poles, and then all of a sudden I jumped to like a sports stadium, and I just started going all over the place, which is crazy. But to your comment then, we might not know yet all of the use cases and the crazy things that it could come up with. That's the part that you just like,
Yeah. Well, you think about this. I mean, I get excited just thinking about the here and now too. It's like we know that we can unlock, you know, 50% productivity gains with these technologies, double the capital efficiency, all the sustainability goals. You take any of these domains and call it critical services that we think, again, you don't sort of think about every day, but these things let us address those in a way that, again, let's take pest control. Today, commercial facilities are required by law to have pest control. The model is like the Romans would have done it. Like every 30 days, some dude shows up and like walks around and checks all 400 rat traps in a warehouse or whatever. They leave poison behind. They're probably not there when an infestation happens. So they have to react to like crises or something that's out of whack and so on too. And they're going every month to do all this. And it takes a lot of time. The new model is you have a state detection device that understands the second it's happening, can not just see signs of pest, but like recognize what pest and where they're going and what the point is. And you can suddenly the world becomes proactive and much more surgical. So you look at a case like pest control, because you're surgical and you're there at the moment it happens, you can see like, oh, just plug that hole. That's where they're coming in. And then, of course, all the truck rolls, the energy involved with sending somebody to all these places and all this like energy that went into that's consumed in the form of, of equipment and vehicles and gas and so on, all goes away too. And so you look at a decent size, pest control industry as an example like that, and you're talking about millions of millions of vehicle runs, per year. You're talking about millions of tons of this, like these toxins. You're talking about at the same time a way better service that like helps us combat the growth of where certain infectious things can happen because of climate change. It's moving out of the equatorial belt, further into parts of the world, and all these other things that are occurring. So it's like it's pretty magical. I mean, it gives you this hopeful view of the future where I will say, I mean, I think that we have the opportunity for like an economic renaissance, right now. Like, it's easy to feel doom and gloom about everything, but if you let at least 50% productivity gain happen with the same labor force, and the services underpinning everything are better and cheaper, and we're killing the earth less in the process, like pretty awesome. You can take all that energy and all that time and all that, the resources and put it into ways of making the world, more awesome place. So it's easy to get, if you think, but you scratch below the surface and you can get really excited about this as sort of one of the really big areas to work on.
is your wife excited by what you're doing now?
She is. She's finally. She'll find another way to be critical, I'm sure. But even early on, I mean, our first customer was randomly as commercial laundry service. It's just what happened to come to us through that process of first talking to these private equity firms, and it was during the pandemic, and there was an article about we had taken these million machines with coin operated laundromats, like you're talking like class C and D apartment buildings, and not the like highest income earners. And like there's this time in the pandemic where there's these terrible stories of like people couldn't do their laundry because like there weren't quarters. You couldn't go get quarters for a lot of it in the supply. And we one aspect of our platform is letting these old laundry machines be retrofitted and digitized because you could sort of activate them remotely and, with phone and so on too. And it was like, she was like, that's like important. Like it's a simple service, you don't think about. It's not like turning on the lights when I'm in my underwear, but it's, clean laundry for everybody. That seems like a critical thing, for modern society. So that's a mundane example, but you look across it and it's cool to work on things that like everyone needs. Everyone needs all of these things. So
Do you just sit around or drive around, see things and go, huh, be so much better if we just digitize that? I know how we could do that. Like, is it an unlimited source of like, because a washing machine example is, well, that's what Samsung wanted to do. I mean, okay, this is commercial. Like, you're taking this is the thing, right? You're taking this from a kind of a consumer thing to like big commercial
yeah.
problems.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't, it's like I don't know what show it was in, but there was like maybe it was a Doctor Who episode. There was like a door in the hallway that no one would see, but it was just always there. It's a little like that. When you learn about this critical infrastructure, you just start to think of the world a different way. Like you notice you were working with this company Osmos, and there's 180 million wooden power poles in the US. And of course you see them everywhere, but I now look at them differently. Okay, what do they get inspected for? Gosh, to send humans around all 180 million poles, every 10 years or so. Like there's hapless crews of people that are literally manually digging out the bases and looking at, more than 10 million of these polls per year. Like, gosh, if we could just detect which ones really needed it, you can save, wow, okay. Unnecessarily, some guy has to go unnecessarily dig out, you know, 4 million polls. You save that work. That's good, like, and so there's all these examples all over the place that you see like that, that are, as you dig into it, you see the world in a new way. That happened a bit with smart things, I will say too, because it was like, what could I do with this? So let me be creative with like how things could operate. And it let you really kind of tune it to your own desires. I mean, it's like, I don't know if we're in a simulation or not, the universe that we're rushing towards. That's a worthwhile conversation over a beer sometime, but it's going to feel more like that. Like we would be able to program the world with software and in a way that physically, I think kind of blows our mind, and especially when you add robotics into the equation that can respond to these things and go out and address things in the infrastructure and so on. It's going to be pretty.
It's wild. Like you sit there and you go, most of the things that maybe we've come up with in terms of an invention, or if you're an entrepreneur and you're like going, what business could I go into? And just my brain explodes when I think about the potential of making dumb things smart from a commercial aspect, like to some of the points that you've raised. I just think it's like,
Yeah,
so this platform, are you launching this platform? Like for everyone that's listening, they're like, you know what, I'm gonna think
yeah,
about pivoting my career because it sounds like there's a few opportunities here.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You see this. It'd be interesting to talk about advice for entrepreneurs and people now, but there's so much opportunity to go apply these technologies to niches, and these
Yep.
niches are huge. I mean, there's all these spaces in the world that can be made to work better, and it's really humans that are it's human systems that are in the way, of getting there, like the people that go touch and feel this infrastructure and so on. I think there's just so many opportunities to go do it. But for our part at the platform, so we are this is the direction we are sort of coming out of. I'll call it stealth as a company. It was inadvertent stealth. I mean, the world's a big place, so we had a crappy website, but we weren't doing. I mean, we had all the sales we could do just via word of mouth from our existing customers and so on. We're in the context the first half of 2025. We're launching this platform and making it available to people to come and get it. Initially, it'll be focused on like working with pretty scaled infrastructure opportunities because we have to get the economics, the cost of these devices down to the point where you buy one for, a handful of dollars and do something in your house. And to do that, we need the kind of use cases initially that need millions of these endpoints and so on too. So yeah, in 2025, this is all here and now. So everything that I talked about is available technology, and we're building solutions based on it, like right now.
It's
Um,
going to be a big year.
it's going to be a big year. I mean, I think people underestimate how fast things are accelerating, and of course, you hear it different things, but it's the stacking of these technologies or the intersection points. I mean, you have IoT that's matured. You have bandwidth that's matured everywhere, including like satellite access. So connectivity, devices. You have next gen sensors that can sense things that you just couldn't sense before, and could do a whole thing on that. That unlock ways of sort of detecting patterns that weren't there. And you have this proliferation of sort of self improvement loop on large language models and AI. You have moved towards agentic AI and autonomous, like small pieces of software leveraging these models. You have what's happening with robotics and the ability to like bring connectivity and IoT and next gen sensors and the edge AI and context to these large language models into the robot. So you just see all these things, and that's why things are accelerating. It's not like Moore's law almost doesn't matter anymore, like whether that's slowed down, because you have this compounding effect of all these layers of technology, and it just opens up everything. There's like no space that's not attackable. So, I think that we will see, we will see a lot of amazing developments, both, from Bright AI, but also lots of technology companies and from people that just have good ideas that aren't even technologists, that sort of wander into the space can apply these things to industry. So it's an awesome best time ever to be alive. Like it's lots of doom and gloom, out in the world, and easy to be worried about things. Of course, we have to be mindful of it, but you know, again, we have an opportunity with things we can do now to make the world work, you know, twice, like multiples of better of how it works, and unlock again a new renaissance, around that.
It's so good to talk to you about it because you're bringing optimism to. Often I can do podcasts about the future of AI and privacy and security, and there's a dark cloud that hangs above. Whereas in this, like, we've spoken for so long now, and I really appreciate you taking the time. But I leave this conversation with optimism.
No, it's great to hear. You know, I I go through the same things. You look at it, and of course, there's all these implications. What if you weaponize these things, or a variety of other functions? And of course, we need to be mindful and steering around all those things. But the opportunity to do good in the world is just cannot be overstated. With these things. So I think if we talk openly and sort of unlock creativity, and then have hardened people, watching the resiliency and security and other things in the background, it's going to be a great time ahead for us.
We're going to definitely need to do a part two because it sounds like, by the sounds of things, of where we're going and the opportunity ahead, it's going to be so good to have you back and talk about how the year's going and how it went and how the platform launch went.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Before we go, I've got to do a couple of fast questions, which I didn't tell you was coming. Sometimes I reverse the questions, but it's probably a good time to ask you this one. You have to finish the sentence. AI will ...
Double the productivity, double the capital efficiency, and unlock all the sustainability goals that we have on the planet.
No, I love it. It's awesome. I got to ask you this other question. Are you still automating your house? That's not a virtual background behind you, is it?
That's not a virtual.
So I'm looking at for those that are listening, I'm looking at a really nice lounge room. It looks like a Samsung frame. I think I can see an Oculus or some kind of VR headset.
All the things. Yeah.
You've got some curtains there. Are they smart curtains?
These are not. I have them in my in the another part of the house. So I'm still automating the home. The use cases have evolved a bit for me. They uh I have a 260-year-old home that we've rehabilitated here, and it's pretty amazing to see it brought to life with smart lighting and thermostats and security and peace of mind. All those things I mentioned are all running in the house, and then this would be a fun field trip someday. I have a nature conservation property that I'm very grateful to have. It's a couple hundred acres that's nearby, and that's where I'm doing the craziest stuff out there. So building a digital twin of this conservation property, so I can see all the
Amazing.
wildlife and activities and air quality and temperature gradients and other things over this whole ecosystem. And that's using some of the stuff we're working on right now. And of course, there I have the ability to make these autonomous robots go check stuff out when I want to, and things too. So make that a future. Put it on your list. Come visit.
Yeah, you got quite the playground. You got a really old house and a nature conserve. It's pretty. It's incredible.
I've been lucky, yeah, on these things, so I'm grateful. But those are the fun spaces to like let the creative juices get unlocked. And I do a lot of stuff in astronomy too. That's a totally random side example that we can get into someday.
I would love to catch up with you and have a beer and talk about some of these things because it sounds like there's some pretty wild. You got some wild theories, but you're also applying some pretty amazing technology to this real world. One more question.
Yeah.
Advice to teenagers today as they come out of school. The reason I started the podcast was someone at work said to me, someone at school actually said to me, with all of this AI going on, what do we tell our kids to do in the future?
Man, that is a really great question. I have had a teenager, and I haven't, and I had one before that's now 20, and I have one that is now 14, and I have a kid that's 10. So I have a lot of teenage time, behind me and a lot in front of me. It's something I think about every single day, honestly. I mean, I think it might sound cheesy, but I would say a couple different things like find what find what fascinates you and brings you joy, and go deep down the rabbit hole, in that. I mean, I think we're coming to a world where creative opportunities with all of these things, will explode. A lot of traditional industries will go away in the way that they have been. And the thing that's going to delineate, success and happiness, I think is and unlock the most value is like following a passion and going as deeply down almost a niche as you possibly can in these things. So, uh, you know, rote learning along a baseline of a lot of different things to me is no longer, it it maybe has relevancy for just sort of understanding human culture and other things. But in terms of navigating career wise and so on, I'm a big believer in follow your nose and your passions and creativity, and therein you will unlock, I think, the good in the world and also find happiness doing it.
That's incredible advice. But it's not
We'll see.
just for teenagers either.
Yeah. Well, these all these things, you learn. Some people know, so their mantras about sort of the way they want to live right away in the beginning. I was not one of those people, so sort of gradually getting to them. But again, I think it's a very hopeful world. But I think it'd be easy to get lost in a space where which baseline skill set, isn't going to be replicable or scalable with AI and other technologies. And I think, of course, the answer is almost none. So I think that a lot of the traditional spaces, are not going to be a source of fulfillment on their own. You got to find what makes you individually passionate and brings you joy. And also, I think that the deepest value is going to be in unlocking the niches, all the spaces that no one thinks about, generally every day. It's like this proliferation of creative leaves on a tree almost. And it's just it's a quite an adventure, but go, again, being creative, loving learning, being grateful, and following your nose into those spaces, I think is the only answer.
Correct. Alex, it's been a touch of pleasure to talk to you. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Bright AI evolves. I'd love to catch up with you again, whether it's on a podcast or it's contemplating the universe. I just really appreciate you taking the time. It's a super long episode, but it's been worth the entire journey. It just really leaves me now quite optimistic, and I hope the audience feels that way as well. And a lot of potential for applying technology to a really dumb world, or a dumb city, and making it smart again.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks. It's been a pleasure, and I'd love to connect again. And love your podcast, and keep being a great audience member as well.